My name is Chad Schultz, and I consult with companies on employment-related issues, the most difficult of which, and clearly the most serious, is workplace violence. It concerns all businesses of any size and in any location. Did you know that the leading cause of death in the workplace among women is murder? A recent survey of large companies in the United States revealed that 50% of them experienced a significant act of violence in a one-year period of time. But we're not here to talk just about extreme forms of violence. We're really interested in preventing all forms of aggressive behavior in the workplace. It must be addressed at the earliest possible stage. The company created this video so that you will know what is expected of you as an employee. The company wants you to be aware of the warning signs so that you can help prevent the escalation of aggression in the workplace and prevent a violent act. Remember, we want to ensure your safety and prevent workplace violence, but we also want you to feel safe on the job. Thank you for your attention to this very important subject. We need your help.
Witnesses say the employee came back to work with a shotgun and semi-automatic rifle and then started shooting his co-workers. Only 150 people who worked at the plant, which builds parts for military aircraft, and before the morning was over, at least 5 dead and nearly a dozen others taken to a local hospital with serious injuries.
Many of the victims appeared that they were shot at their workstation. It appears they collapsed unbeknownst to themselves. They were being shot.
Outside the plant in this small community near the Alabama border, families had to look at a list to learn the fate of their loved ones.
You know, when you look on the list and see something like that, it's hard to handle, really.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mark McElhaney. I've spent the last 15 years helping companies like yours identify and prevent potential aggression and violence in the workplace. The first important step to prevent violence in the workplace is to define and identify it. Violence in the workplace is generally defined as any kind of aggressive conduct, conduct that would be considered intimidating, hostile, offensive, or threatening. This can occur through words, actions, or physical contact. Any behavior whose aim is to abuse or harass others with intent to harm is generally considered an aggressive act. Its intent may actually be to cause psychological harm, which could be in some ways even more devastating to an individual and an organization over the long term than physical aggression. Examples of emotionally abusive behavior may include bullying, verbal humiliation, or any kind of harassment. Many people think of workplace violence simply as the media stereotype of the crazed, disgruntled employee with an automatic weapon firing indiscriminately at employees and managers. Our definition is much broader. Your company is interested in any and all behaviors that create a hostile work environment and negatively affect other employees, either physically or psychologically. Aggressive behavior will escalate into further violence if it is not addressed early. You should feel free to report all potential acts and threats of violence.
There was blood, a trail of blood going down the hallway. I saw a lady looking in the leasing office with her mouth gaped open. I walked by her, I looked in, there was a pool of blood. I didn't see anyone, I didn't see a victim. I go into my office, tell everybody there's obviously been a shooting. I come back out, and by that time the cops were in the hallway securing it.
They said, "Get down, he's got a gun." There he is up on the roof. And he had a girl up there with him, and he was holding her up over the edge of the building. And then we just hid behind cars and took off running.
And it's kind of scary. I mean, my first thought it happened in my office. My first concern was for my coworkers.
Threats of violence can take a variety of forms, from direct, clearly stated remarks to statements or even gestures that are ambiguous but imply a threat. The threat can be conditional, where the employee says or implies that they will act in a violent manner if something else happens. However, we want to caution you that when we speak of threats of violence, we do not want to imply that we're only interested in those who are actually making a threatening remark. Many people who engage in a violent act do not always proceed it with a threat. Your company is interested both in individuals who make a threat and those who pose a threat. Very simply, your company is interested in any kind of behavior, words, or actions that imply that the safety of an employee or any member of society is at risk. Keep in mind that threatening behavior can take many forms and need not involve a direct statement. You as an employee should not feel obligated to determine whether a threat is legitimate or serious before reporting it. If you have a reasonable doubt, report the concern so that it can be fairly and appropriately reviewed. You do have an obligation to your coworkers and yourself to report your concerns, either to your supervisor or to those identified by your company at the conclusion of this program.
In July, Doug Williams opened fire inside the Lockheed Martin plant in Meridian, Mississippi, killing 5 people, wounding 9 others. Also the same month, a coworker opened fire at a real estate office in San Antonio, killing 2 people, critically injuring a 3rd. In Atlanta, who could forget one of the worst workplace homicides in history? The day Mark Barton went on a shooting rampage in Buckhead. In the end, 13 were dead, 13 wounded.
People tend to feel captured. And when they feel as though they run out of options, I mean, they explode. And that's what we're seeing a lot of. They find someone to put all this faceless rage on.
I am often asked about the profile of a potentially violent person. And I would love to provide a clear, unambiguous picture of that individual. But there are many reasons that people can resort to violence. Violence and aggressive behavior are the result of 3 factors. The individual, which includes the personality of the individual, that may act to increase the likelihood of violent behavior. The level of emotional stress that may be acting on that person to make them more prone to lose control. And the situation or setting, those outside factors in a person's life, both inside and outside the workplace, that may be fueling the situation. There are, however, certain common warning signs that we continue to see in the area of workplace violence. These signs do not represent a checklist, nor is the list all-inclusive. They are simply signs that we see frequently, which should warrant your attention and prompt some kind of review. Most of the items on this particular list suggest that the individual may be under a severe level of stress, or may suggest personality characteristics that are at risk for evolving into aggressive behavior or violent acts. The first warning sign is making threats. Many individuals who commit workplace violence actually have a history of making threats, or have exhibited threatening behavior that, for one reason or another, has not been reported to management. We often see employees who have a history of being bullies. These individuals have successfully gotten their way by being confrontational and intimidating to others. And what has naturally occurred is that other employees and even managers have kept the peace by simply avoiding this individual. Sometimes there is an increased preoccupation with violence and weaponry, an obsession beyond what is typical for this individual and for others in that environment. Sometimes the individual may refer to past incidents of workplace violence. Individuals with an unstable social history may be at greater risk when there's an increased level of stress in their lives. Often these individuals have a history of relationship problems that are also seen within the workplace. Often there's a definite decline in performance, sometimes with concentration difficulties, accidents, and attendance problems, all signs of increased stress and loss of motivation. Another potential warning sign is when someone is overly obsessed. It could be a particular grievance or with a particular belief system that's not rational to most. In many situations, we have found that coworkers have experienced fear or trepidation around this individual, which either was not reported to or not adequately addressed by management. Employees may complain that another employee makes them uncomfortable and that they experience anxiety when around that employee, or they may just have a gut feeling about that employee. These types of complaints may or may not be valid, but they should not be routinely dismissed. The term disgruntled employee is often used when someone is convinced that he or she is a victim of gross injustice and believes that the company is not responding to him or her. In addition, they may have difficulty accepting blame for anything and have an extremely high view of themselves with an exaggerated sense of entitlement. Individuals who are self-destructive or have self-destructive tendencies like drug abuse, extreme risk-taking, or threats of suicide pose a threat. Many people who have committed lethal workplace violence are also suicidal. A final warning sign concerns individuals who are angered by perceived minor slights and erroneously interpret remarks and behaviors as personal attacks.
Investigators revealed more evidence in the shootings that left 13 people dead, including the gunman, his wife, and 2 children. The first word of the killings at 2 brokerage firms came in telephone calls to emergency services.
Quick! 911, quick, we've got an emergency in Piedmont Center building. We already got the police on the ambulance about now. Go over to there's a lady that's down.
Police say it was only a matter of 4 minutes before their first units arrived on the scene. But it would be 5 hours before it all ended with the suicide of investor Mark O. Barton. Notes were discovered with the bodies that purported to unveil Barton's motive for massacre. They were read out loud by an emotional police chief.
I don't plan to live very much longer, just long enough to kill as many of the people that greedily sought my destruction. And the last sentence states, you should kill me if you can.
An important but rarely discussed type of workplace violence begins outside the work environment. In the past, most employees and management have been reluctant to get involved in the personal lives of other employees, which is understandable. However, a significant percentage of violence that occurs in the workplace originates from circumstances outside of the workplace. This is particularly true in situations involving domestic abuse. A recent survey found that 74% of abused women reported that some of the abuse occurred while they were at work. Why is that? Simply because the workplace is a convenient place to locate a person. He may not know where she is hiding, where she is living, but he knows where she works, what time she arrives at work, when she leaves, where she parks her car, and maybe even the location of her workspace. It is therefore imperative that employees report not only internal problems, but also any potentially violent situation that may put other employees at risk.
Authorities at the plant say 6 people are dead. It happened at Atlantic Plastics in Henderson early Wednesday morning. Henderson police say an employee argued with a supervisor and was being escorted from the building. Somehow the employee pulled a gun and shot the supervisor. The employee then charged a break room, shooting several other people. He managed to shoot one more employee, then turned the gun on himself. Police say the shooting appears to have been random. They say the employee had a history of not getting along with others.
We know that he's had some problems with other employees in the past. We don't know if they were present or if they were involved in this particular incident.
We are always reading in the newspaper and hearing on the news about people who are said to just snap, who become violent without warning. We hear that phrase in the media a lot, that someone came to work one day and started shooting. However, we never find that actually to be the case. In every single event that we have investigated or have been part of, we eventually uncover a history, a sequence of events, or warning signs that could have alerted us to the possibility of an escalating risk of violence if reported. Because we did not respond early enough in the process, it became much more dangerous to everyone involved. Everyone must take responsibility to identify those aggressive behaviors before they escalate to a violent situation, which for the most part is preventable if we know about it in time. The most important preventative measure for any workplace is not to ignore any signs that suggest that an individual may be troubled or inclined to engage in harmful behavior. Secondly, management is not going to be aware of aggressive episodes unless the employees who witness these incidents report them. If you witness any form of aggression or any behavior that for any reason makes you feel uncomfortable, you should report that situation to your manager or supervisor. Safety is your company's prime concern for all of its employees, but your company needs you and your participation to accomplish this. You are a critical part of the process. We need your help.
Workers at the Lockheed Martin plant in Meridian, Mississippi say they warned supervisors that co-worker Doug Williams was threatening to go on a killing spree. In July of 2003, Williams walked into the plant and shot 5 people to death. Survivors say their warnings were ignored.
And he said, you know, one of these days, I'm going to come in here and kill up me a bunch of then I'm going to kill myself.
This portion of the program is for those who supervise or manage other employees and adds to what you've already learned in the employee section. As a manager, you are critical to identifying the early warning signs of aggressive conduct. Your company relies on you to identify and report any aggressive or inappropriate behavior. Additionally, part of your job is to create an environment where your employees feel comfortable coming to you to discuss any workplace problem, including a coworker's aggressive or potentially violent behavior. Although there are no clear-cut signs for predicting aggression or violence, we have discussed some of the more common warning signs. Many of these are signs of someone who is under stress. Many incidents of violence and other inappropriate behaviors could have been prevented if managers had been more conscious of employees who are showing signs of emotional stress. Signs of emotional stress may include an unexplained increase in absenteeism or tardiness, noticeable decrease in attention to appearance and hygiene, reduced motivation and commitment to the job, social withdrawal and moodiness, unexplained explosive outburst of anger or rage, comments that indicate hopelessness or possible suicide thoughts, repeated angry complaints and grievances, inattention to rules and resistance to authority, behaviors considered odd or uncharacteristic of that employee, frequent references to unfairness and injustice, and an unusual degree of political or religious proselytizing. We do not want to somehow suggest that if an employee exhibits any one of these signs, he or she is going to become a violent employee, nor do we want to imply that a manager is responsible for reacting to every one of these warning signs in an extreme manner. However, we encourage you to pay attention to these behaviors. They should not be dismissed and should be examined within the proper context. We often see aggressive behavior that escalates into violence because it has not been addressed. Many of us have a basic tendency to avoid conflict and confrontation. However, if we avoid or delay disciplining an individual, it often just gets worse. If you are concerned about the reaction of an individual to a disciplinary process, you should proceed cautiously and begin by raising your concerns with an appropriate company representative. You should do this before taking any action so that a plan can be formulated to properly and safely address the problem. There are 3 steps to keep in mind when addressing potential warning signs. The first thing is not to overreact. Simply because someone has these signs or exhibits this kind of behavior does not necessarily mean they're going to be dangerous. Secondly, do not try to find excuses for their behavior. Document the times, dates, and circumstances. Third, notify and consult with someone. This will ensure that you have adequately attended to the problem and have reviewed your concerns with others. This will help you decide on the next course of action, if any. These are potentially explosive situations in which all decisions should be well considered. You are not expected to handle these by yourself. As always, if you believe that you or other employees' lives are in immediate danger, you should follow the normal emergency response, such as calling 911. In the event you are confronted with an employee who is irate, aggressively hostile, or even threatening, until you can get further assistance, there are certain guidelines that you can follow to help manage the situation. First, speak calmly and with an even pace. Keep your voice tone and volume at a lower level than theirs. Do not attempt to shout over them. Maintain a safe degree of space between you. Do not physically crowd them. Give them and yourself an exit. Use non-threatening physical gestures. Avoid pointing your finger or balling up your fist. Speak with your palms up. Avoid leaning forward. Maintain eye contact and do not sit with your arms folded as if you are ignoring them. Do not argue or be otherwise defensive with them. Be agreeable and do not moralize. Actively listen. Demonstrate that you are listening by asking them questions and repeating what they say. Show them that you are interested. Always remain respectful, regardless of their behavior. Deflect or ignore personal attacks. Do not allow yourself to be baited into an argument. Resist the tendency to take their comments personally or to strike back verbally. Acknowledge their concerns. Let them know that you are listening, interested, and value what they are saying. Build self-esteem. Acknowledge their value as a person. Compliment whenever possible. Avoid an audience. If possible, try to remove the conversation to a quieter setting. Doing your part to maintain an aggression-free workplace helps to increase efficiency, increase productivity, and reduce cost. Aggression is certainly costly from a personal safety standpoint, but it also carries many intangible ramifications, including employees who resign because they feel uncomfortable at work. It can also result in other costs, including property damage, legal cost, health care cost, workers' compensation claims, increased security cost, and just as importantly, damage to employee morale. Being a manager is not an easy job. We know that. But your role is critical to ensuring safety. We rely on your observations and your willingness to report your concerns. Your company is committed to supporting you and keeping all employees safe from harm in an aggression-free workplace. Thank you for your attention to this very important safety issue.